So glad you came to join us today. And whether you are watching this live or watching in the future, I pray that it is a tremendous blessing in your life. I'm really excited to have made it to May 3rd, 2023 at 2 p.m. I've been looking forward to this interview with Dr. Laura Sanger, author of The Roots of the Federal Reserve, and Dr. Alphonso Monzo III, author of the Aleph Tav Body System. We've been looking forward to this since the end of 2022. This has been in the makings. We began then looking for a date that would fit the calendar of both of my expert guests. And I say expert because each of their research and practices are truly on the cutting edge of this significant time period we're experiencing on the earth. The very nature of humankind is to love things that our Creator abhors. In Romans 8:5-8, we are told, "For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Ruach, the things of the Ruach. For to be carnally minded is death, and to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is at enmity against Elohim, for it is not subject to the Torah of Elohim, neither indeed can be. So then they that are in the flesh can't please Elohim." So Dr. Sanger often states in her teachings what can be found that can be found on her Rumble and YouTube channels called No Longer Enslaved, that according to Ephesians 5:11, we are to have nothing to do with the deeds of darkness, but rather we are to expose them. The broad subjects that we're going to be exploring today include: what is the Nephilim Agenda? What is the difference between Nephilim hybrids and Nephilim hosts? Advances that have been made and are being made in mind control technology, nanotechnology, weaponized pathogens, and weapons in the toolbox and the believers of Yeshua, the help available to us in breaking free from the mind control agenda of the Nephilim. So these are some really tough subjects of the reality of the world in which we find ourselves in. It's going to take some real spiritual fortitude to accept the reality of the influence of the Nephilim and their gift to us humans of their artificial intelligence. It will take humility and true relationship with our Heavenly Father to stand firm in this day and to have no tolerance for evil. So before I bring on our guest, I wanted to let the audience know that my friend, Dr. Carrie Brown, is monitoring the live chat. She's a fellow naturopath. And if you think of a question that you would like to ask our guest, please type that question in all caps. And if time allows, at the end of our presentation, Carrie will alert me to those questions and I will present them to our guest. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring on our guest. I want to go ahead and welcome Dr. Laura Sanger to the broadcast. Dr. Sanger, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
I'm just honored to have you on. And I'm also going to bring on a fellow expert, Dr. Monzo. Dr. Monzo, welcome. Hello. So glad you could join us today.
So am I. It's great to be on. It's a great privilege to be with both of you. And we got all our technical stuff worked out.
Amazing. The power of prayer. We were all praying.
Yeah, they told us they weren't going to be able to get to us or send someone out until 7.
Oh, wow. What a miracle.
So,
well, the Father just went before us and cleared the way because he wanted this to happen today. And we're so grateful for his faithfulness to us. You know, he overcomes darkness. He just does. All right. Well, you know, I'm so glad that you were on. We went ahead and kind of welcomed everybody to the chat. We're going to try to maybe ask a few questions. I did explain kind of what our subject matter was going to be today. So I'm going to start with Dr. Sanger and let us talk to us about the Nephilim Agenda. Dr. Sanger.
Well, thank you again for having me. I think it's always wonderful to speak with new audiences because, as you mentioned, you know, in Ephesians 5:11, I know that the Lord has called me to, uncover these fruitless deeds of darkness. And so I'm just thrilled to be with you today. So the Nephilim Agenda, for those that haven't been exposed to my work or read my book, what I do is I dive into history and I look at, well, yes, there it is. So I essentially, first, maybe I just have to tell a quick story of how I wrote this book because it was so unconventional. I'm a psychologist by profession. I am not a monetary expert. And I had no idea that I would ever write a book on the Federal Reserve, but I love to say yes to the Lord. And, he just takes us on these scavenger hunts. At least he does with me. My husband and I, we've been involved in youth ministry almost our entire marriage, and we're coming up on 31 years of marriage. And so we love planning all these events for youth that they have to figure out clues and decipher code and all of that. And so the Holy Spirit knows that I love that. And he essentially took me on this massive scavenger hunt for 4 years where I researched and wrote the roots of the Federal Reserve. And it spans from the dawn of humanity to our current day, and it identifies this Nephilim agenda that has pretty much defiled our entire monetary system and also other institutions in our land. And so anyways, I trace this agenda from the days of Noah to our current debt enslavement system we call the Federal Reserve. So I'm always grateful, like I said, to be able to speak with new audiences because I know that the Lord wants me to uncover this Nephilim agenda and how it impacts us today. So I'll just share a little bit about what I mean when I describe this Nephilim agenda. So essentially, it was unleashed during the days of Noah, and it's the plan to defile the human genome through the propagation of a hybrid race. Now, the purpose of that is they want to overthrow God's kingdom. The origins of this Nephilim agenda are actually found in the seed war of Genesis 3. And I'll read 2 verses. This is verse 14 and 15. It says, "So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." So we know that after the fall of Adam and Eve, Yahweh declared war between the seed of Eve, which is humanity, and the seed of Satan. Now, one day, Eve's seed would crush Satan, and we know this was a prophetic declaration of the coming Messiah. And so Satan's strategy then was to contaminate the seed of the woman by altering the genetic code of humans. Now, this is where the fallen sons of God become integral in Satan's strategy. And we read about this not only in Genesis 6, but also in the extra biblical text of the book of Enoch. So these fallen sons of God, they chose to leave their heavenly abode. They invaded the earth realm by descending on Mount Hermon. And then from there, they lusted after the daughters of men. They took them as wives, mated with them, and defiled the human genome by birthing a hybrid race of giants known as the Nephilim. So the Nephilim really are the seed of Satan. They're created in his image. Now, one of the things that I did in my book is, given this ethereal nature of the Nephilim, I felt that it was important to establish a set of proposed criteria that would help advance our ability to discern the presence of Nephilim traits within individuals. So in chapter 13 of my book, what I do is I identify 4 physical traits and 19 behavioral characteristics of the Nephilim and their giant offspring. And really, because we must not be deceived in thinking that the Nephilim only roamed the earth during the days of antiquity. So I propose that there are Nephilim and Nephilim hosts alive today. Now, a Nephilim host is something that people might be unfamiliar with. That's a term that I coined in my book, and it represents a human who is intentionally partnered with the spiritual forces of darkness to carry out this Nephilim agenda. And so these would be people, that would meet the proposed criteria in chapter 13. And I think many of them are the titans of global governance. These are the global elites over banking and industry, media, academia, healthcare, big tech, big pharma, and the political establishment for sure. One of the things that we have to know about these Nephilim hosts is that they are intent on destroying the followers of Jesus while enslaving the masses through control, domination, and intimidation. And, really, this agenda, this Nephilim agenda, is the same as the globalist agenda. They're after the same end goal, and that is the total domination of humanity. It's really tyranny on the grandest scale. So that's how I would define this Nephilim agenda.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Sanger. That's a wonderful, introduction into our subject. Dr. Monzo, I know that you have certainly had some interesting encounters and a lot of experience in this area as well. Would you like to share with us your experience on this Nephilim agenda?
Sure. Well, I pretty much agree. And I guess I have a number of different experiences, but I'll just talk about my research here first and then real life experience.
Absolutely. Let me hold up
Yes.
your book too. You can see I got it tabbed all over the place. What a reference manual. I love both of these books.
Yeah, so I have the Off-Top Body System, which is, for people who do not know, is we have discovered the Hebrew letters on the body as master control points, and they control everything about the physical body, of course. And so you can do a light laying on of hands on specific Hebrew control points and bring restoration back to the body. And then I don't know when, but well, it's way before COVID, maybe 2018, somewhere around there is when I got into studying weaponized pathogens and nanotechnology and how they were making diseases. And of course, I traced it at least back to the 1940s with what was going on in Nazi Germany, and found that basically all this technology that I'm talking about today is all Nephilim technology. And what they are doing is they're bringing back their ancient technology. And so there's all kinds of, you would call it software versions of nanotech that are very demonic. It goes by the name of satanic information technology. And it's what controls almost all the nanotechnology today. And what they've been doing, at least since the 40s, if not before, is making these weaponized nanotech pathogens. So we really wouldn't consider them really a pathogen anymore by the normal sense. They are a mixed, mingled seed of all types of organisms, as well as technology and toxins. And they connect to wireless technologies. They're very advanced. So what the game has been since the 1940s is they have just been making the diseases. Most of the diseases we have today, they have made, because they're spraying this stuff, they're putting it in the food. It's just all over the place. I mean, I don't test anyone now that doesn't have some sort of this technology in them. And the technology is plug and play. Someone else said that. Oh, Moderna. Yeah, because what they're doing is they're layering this technology into people. And certain parts of the technology they need to, what word can we use? Jab you with. And certain technologies they can just spray. But when it gets into your body, it starts self-assembling and coming together and forming a network in your body. And they've made it pretty far now, but I think everything we've seen in the last 3 years is a test run. As far as I can tell, they're really good at turning genes on and off with like epigenetics. I don't think they're able to actually put a new code in yet, but they really want to. So the ultimate goal on this type of technology is transhumanism. They don't want us to remain human. They want us to turn us into something else. And of course, the false premise is, oh, we're going to cure cancer and we're going to cure all your disease, and nanotech is so beneficial. But when you really look into it and you find the scientists talking about nanotech, they really don't know where it comes from. They think they designed it, but then they come out with these statements all the time, like, we just discovered that they can self-assemble and build themselves. It's like, what do you mean you discovered? Like, didn't you make the stuff? And if you made it, you just now found out it can do something you didn't create it to do. It's like, no. So the reality is all these scientists are just a bunch of pawns. They have no idea what technology they're messing with or who's actually in control of it. So that's kind of my area of expertise on the subject. And the other thing was I had an experience, of course, last year at the Red Pill conference where I met a real life Nephilim, I believe. Maybe he was a host, but he was big, he was tall, much bigger than me, very muscular, looked like Superman, very good looking, charming. And he kept moving his table more and more like close to me. And I was like, what is this guy? At the time the Red Pill conference was going on, there was a magic conference in the same building. I was like, oh, of course. Yeah. I thought he was with them because his book was about aliens and it had the the all-seeing eye on it and everything, and I was like, oh, maybe he's with the magic people. But it turned out he was actually there for the Red Pill conference. And when he finally got in to talk to me, besides trying to give me this big messianic handshake, he started right off with, do you believe in aliens? And I was like, how do I want to answer this? I don't even know this guy. I'm like, yes, but I don't know if you want to know what I think they are. So I was like, yeah. And then he's like, do you believe they could be walking among us and look just like us? So I was like, thinking to myself, of course, well, if they're a Nephilim, yes. Or, demon, yes. And he's like, great, because I am one, and I came from this planet, and I'm here to help you guys. And so at first, I wasn't sure. I mean, I had a major check in my spirit. He had those eyes that looked like right through you, and I was like, all right, is this guy crazy? Is he a con man? And he's just telling people he's an alien, because people were into that stuff today. Or is this real? Well, literally 2 minutes after he shook my hand, it's basically like literally all hell broke loose. Not just with me, but at home, miles away. And all of our technology started going haywire and stuff. And I was like, oh, this guy is like. And then we had other counters that I can't actually explain right now because I don't want the enemy knowing what I actually know. But let's just say I probably wasn't supposed to come home from that trip.
Wow. And we're just so grateful for the protection that Yah granted you. And, because both of you guys are just boldly going, where Yah is sending you. And you're both on such amazing commissions that the Father has given you. And we're so grateful, as the body of Messiah for the work that you're doing and the light that you are shining in the darkest places. And I just think it's amazing. I've got a couple of questions. So I know we're going to go into, in just a moment, I'm going to go to Dr. Sanger and she's going to explain kind of the difference between the Nephilim, and hybrids and things of that nature. But I had a quick question. I'm going to address it to Dr. Monzo, and then I want to hear Dr. Sanger's response to this also. But so Dr. Monzo, considering what you just shared with us, what are your thoughts currently on the ancient Nephilim DNA, like in the current pyramid excavations and different excavations that are going on that we're reading about, and other archaeological finds that were resulting in the bones of these giants being excavated and the DNA extraction being used in the fertility, let's create a designer baby labs that are going on all across the globe right now. Can you talk to us on that just a little bit?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely going on. Just excuse me. I can't reach. And of course, my late friend, whether you love him or hate him, who's no longer with us, Rob Skiba, he had some interesting ideas on this too, especially during, the Gulf War, when they went in, they dug up the remains of Nimrod, and the military has those remains, and they were also working on something called a resurrection tomb. So you really wonder, are they going to try to resurrect this man somehow with their new technology, or bring him back somehow, because his descriptions match the descriptions of Antichrist? But anyways, you've heard the work of what's his name? L.A.
Marzulli.
Yes.
So
I was in a show in the book. One of the interesting things is that the Hebrew points on the body control the genes, because I think we all understand now that most of our DNA is epigenetic. I mean, in other words, so if people don't understand, very little of our genetic code is written in stone. Most of it is related to epigenetics, meaning genes can be turned on and off, and gene expression can be changed based on lifestyle and environment, and even thoughts, emotions, behavior. And that's controlled by the energetics. The energetics control the epigenetics, and then the epigenetics control the gene expression. So I have found that the Hebrew letters control the different chromosomes. And one of them, which I was going to show up, was, where's the camera? You see, everyone can see that, the mem, which is right here on the chest. Where's my finger? It's backward. My camera's backwards. So right there is the mem. And of course, in Hebrew, the mem has this concept of water and fertility and chaos and birthing. And this point happens to control the reproductive system. It's not the only one, but it's the number one point for reproduction. Oh, and it also happens to be the very point that they keep finding cut out of people in these mutilations. When they find people left somewhere and there's a mutilation and they can't explain it because the technology is beyond us, but there's parts of the body that are cut out without any blood loss, it's exactly at that location. So I think they're messing around with the creator's design, taking the energetic side of the body that actually controls reproduction and trying to put that into their hybrids that they are growing in labs, and they are trying to reproduce in multiple different ways. So, they're doing these data banks everywhere now. Almost everyone who collects DNA these days shares it with the powers that be. So, doing these genetic tests are not always safe because you don't know who they're giving the DNA to. A lot of hospitals are doing the same things now. When a baby's born, they want to prick the feet and take blood samples, and it's like, what do you need this for?
Right.
And I think they know a lot about gene altering and how they want to try to change the code. And we don't know exactly what they're looking for, but it's really interesting to see how all that's taking place and what they're trying to bring back and how they're even using it today.
Yeah. Thank you so much. What a great explanation. Dr. Singer, would you like to respond to that and give us your thoughts on that one?
Yes, I mean, I agree with Dr. Monzo that certainly they are trying to, produce hybrids, and that's what the Nephilim Agenda is. Some of the experiences that I have just in listening to survivors, I call them overcomers, but overcomers of satanic ritual abuse is, back in the 1940s, 1944 to be exact, Hitler was really trying to breed hybrids. And, there's a conception ritual that was part of this Hitler project in which, they brought together people from the royal bloodline, meaning royal monarchy, with another person. And they had this pre-planned conception event. And the purpose of that was really to establish this satanic bloodline with the convergence of all these 13 royal bloodlines. And, the enemy has been busy building this hybrid army ever since. And so it doesn't surprise me that they're trying to find the DNA of Nephilim. From this conception ritual. Maybe I'll describe it a little bit more so people aren't confused. Yeah. What happens is, like I said, it's a pre-planned event. And at the same time, all across the world, there are rituals involving blood sacrifice that took place. And the purpose of that is it was to be synchronized so that at the point of conception, there was this intense iniquity force that happened at that point of conception, where there was an interplay with the spiritual forces of darkness, creating a triple helix DNA in the children conceived in that moment. Now, without going too far into things, there are ways, because they have this triple helix DNA, there are other rituals once they're 12 or 13, the women that are born as a result of this conception ritual, when they're 12 or 13, there's another ritual that takes place in which Satan takes on human form and rapes them. And because they have that triple helix DNA, that's in the spiritual realm. That third strand is in the spiritual realm. They are able to conceive Nephilim. And I have a good friend. I know, Chelle, you've heard my podcast interview on blurry creatures with Elle.
Yes.
And she is a dear friend of mine. We've been friends for about a year now. And she is from the royal bloodline. She lives in South Africa. And she was conceived during this conception event ritual. And she has birthed both Nephilim and hybrids and humans. And so not only are they, birthing Nephilim, but they're trying to dig up the remains of, giants from antiquity as well. So I think any means by which they can create a hybrid army, they're going to do it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's fascinating the times that we live in. Now, Dr. Singer, did you want to expand any more on the difference between the Nephilim, the hybrids, and the Nephilim hosts before I ask you another question?
Yeah, I think that'll be really helpful because I get this question a lot. And so I think to distinguish between, what is a hybrid, what is a Nephilim, what is a Nephilim host, and our Nephilim host really just demonized people. So distinguishing all of that. So maybe to start with, just by addressing the Nephilim are hybrids. So a hybrid is essentially a mixture of human and non-human. And there's two primary categories of hybrids. There's augmented humans, and then there's mixed species humans. Now, an augmented human would be someone who's genetically altered to it, for enhancement. So these are like humans 2.0, certainly super soldiers. You've heard China has these super soldiers. Well, these are a form of hybridization. Then you have mixed species hybrids, and these would be chimeras are one example. So those are a blend of animal and human. And then you would have Nephilim. Nephilim are a blend of human and spiritual beings. And so that kind of distinguishes a bit what Nephilim are. Now, what is the difference between a Nephilim and a hybrid? Because I just mentioned that my friend Elle has birthed both. So my understanding from what she communicates to me is that she has birthed Nephilim when she has been raped by Satan. They are the direct seed of Satan. She has birthed hybrids when she has been raped by Nephilim. So hopefully that helps to distinguish a bit. Now, a Nephilim host is, again, it's something that I termed in my book, a term that I coined in my book, and it would represent a human. So 100% human that has intentionally partnered with the spiritual forces of darkness to carry out this Nephilim agenda. And when I, came up with this proposed criteria for classification of Nephilim host, what I did is I conducted a literature review. So I utilized ancient text, extra biblical manuscripts, and also the biblical record to identify 4 physical traits and 19 behavioral characteristics of the Nephilim and their giant offspring. And so a Nephilim host would be, somebody who meets that criteria. And so what I'm proposing is that they would have at least 3 physical traits and 3 behavioral characteristics. Now, if they don't have any physical traits, I propose that they would need at least 5 behavioral characteristics. And I want to just, before I go over these, I want to give a disclaimer, because as I was developing this criteria, I drew upon the concepts found in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. I'm a psychologist. We use the DSM when we diagnose people with mental illness. So I drew upon the concepts in there, but I want to make sure that I am by no means claiming that, this cluster of traits can be used to determine a clinical diagnosis. It is simply a proposed criteria, because there's a lot of research that goes into identifying symptoms to be able to diagnose a mental disorder, for example. So this would need a whole lot more research than what I've done. I've just done a literature review, essentially. So just want to give that disclaimer first. But now I'll go over these physical traits and behavioral characteristics. So again, we're looking for 3 or more physical traits. And the first one would be excessively tall, like Dr. Monzo described his encounter. And we would want to rule out gigantism. And these are folks like 7 to 9 feet or even taller than that. So I've had people email me like, I'm 6'8" and I'm super strong. And I understand, certainly people are tall. And as I go through this, we're not just looking for one genetic marker, but these are folks 7 feet or taller. And again, we would want to rule out gigantism. Another physical trait certainly would be extraordinarily strong. We see this all throughout scripture, and even encounters that people have had with giants, true giants, that they are incredibly strong. Also polydactyly, which is having 6 fingers or 6 toes, and then red hair. Now, I want to describe why I included red hair in this proposed criteria, because I do not want to offend anyone with red hair. My grandmother had red hair, and she was my spiritual mentor. My aunt has red hair. I have tons of friends with red hair. I am not suggesting that they are Nephilim hosts simply because they have red hair. But what I discovered in my investigation, looking all throughout history, is really the color red became known as this calling card for the Nephilim agenda. And it's a form of symbolism, really, that I found, like I mentioned, all throughout my investigation, really beginning with when Esau transformed into Edom and he chose to be red. And so as I was scouring through historical documents, it was undeniable that the color red was associated with other Nephilim traits, whether that was the Edomites, the elongated skulls of Caracas, Peru, whether that was the red-haired cannibals that terrorized the Paiute tribe in Nevada. You have the Tarim Basin mummies in China, the Celts, the Scythians, and the Khazarians. And looking at all of that, it really became clear that red hair can be considered a trait of a Nephilim host. Now, again, it would be foolish to make a determination based on one genetic marker alone. Just like I couldn't diagnose somebody with schizophrenia based on one symptom alone. You need a cluster of traits or a cluster of symptoms. So I just wanted to kind of explain why I included red hair. Now, to go over some of these behavioral characteristics, again, we're looking for 3 behavioral characteristics if someone has had 3 physical traits. But if they have no physical traits, then we're looking for at least 5 behavioral characteristics, with one exception. In characteristics 13 through 19, as I read them, you'll see these are much more intense, severe characteristics. And I propose that if someone has 2 or more in that category, then irregardless if they have any other traits or characteristics, they could be considered a Nephilim host. Okay, so I'll read through these. First one is lustfulness in conjunction with sexual misconduct. Deceitfulness as indicated by repeated lying and purposeful misrepresentation for personal profit and pleasure. Pervasive pattern of instability in relationships marked by control, manipulation, intimidation, and domination over others. Rebellious behavior and a disregard for the rule of law. Haughty and prideful as if above reproach. Vengeful or inappropriate intense anger. Participation in sorcery, witchcraft, and/or the occult. Reoccurring violent acts displaying a disregard for the rights of others. A lack of remorse for heinous acts against other living beings, excessive focus on death-related topics and/or symbolism, an underlying dark personality that is marked by overinflated self-righteousness, dishonesty in trade and business transactions, a propensity toward corruption. And now here begins 13 through 19, and again, these are the more intense ones. Sexual perversion, including pedophilia, sexual domination of others against their will and/or bestiality, trafficker of humans, engage in cannibalism, commit treasonous acts, a pervasive pattern of engagement in sexual and/or blood occult rituals, commit human sacrifices, and the enslavement of others. So that kind of gives you an idea of this proposed criteria for a Nephilim host. Now, what's the difference between a Nephilim host and someone who is demonized or afflicted by demons? So someone who is demonized would have a demon residing within them. If they're a believer, they would not have that demon residing in their spirit. Their spirits are born again. But, if we have open doors in our soul, for example, whether it's generational iniquity, whether it's iniquity patterns in our own life that are unresolved, those can be open doors to demonic oppression. And those people that have or have demonic oppression it's different from a Nephilim host. And the difference is intentionality. So Nephilim hosts intentionally partner with the spiritual forces of darkness. A demonized person does not intentionally ask a demon to come into their lives. Now, a biblical example of this is we see in Matthew 17, Jesus healed the boy that was demonized. And this demon was terrorizing this boy. He was having seizures. He was being thrown into the fire. He was almost drowning on several occasions. And this is an example of what demons try and do. And they try and, torture and kill the person that they're inhabiting. Well, this boy in scripture, we don't see any indication that he welcomed this demon into his life. Whereas in scripture, we see female shrine and male shrine prostitutes that oftentimes are around like the temples for Artemis, Diana, other Queen of Heaven examples in scripture. And these shrine male and female prostitutes, they engage in occult rituals, sex magic, that they are involved in, and they're demonized people. So these are more of an example of what a Nephilim host would be. So hopefully that kind of helps distinguish a little bit.
Yes, thank you so much. What a great explanation. So, Dr. Monzo, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Dr. Sanger just shared with us.
Yeah, because I actually have a question now.
Okay, great. You're allowed.
I can't help but see that like a number of really bad relationships with friends and families where the person turned out to be an absolute narcissist. I can't help but think that a lot of those traits are the same. So I wonder, what do you do with the narcissistic type behavior? Because obviously probably not all of them are Nephilim hosts, but have you found a large correlation? Because I mean, the few people I'm
most definitely
who were like almost everything on that list.
Right. Certainly you would want to rule out narcissism if someone is truly a narcissist, but they don't have, some of these other characteristics that would differentiate them. But similar to like other mental illnesses, you do have a lot of crossover. And so, it's important to kind of tease out. Now, I know, in fact, working with narcissists was one of the hardest things for me as a clinician. I had to recognize my own countertransference. And oftentimes I just had to refer them to other clinicians because they would push every single one of my buttons. But in the few narcissists that I did work with, or I shouldn't label them narcissists, the people who have narcissism, those folks that I worked with, they did not have this dark demonic sense to them. They certainly had overinflated sense of ego and some of these other issues. So I think that would be helpful in determining or distinguishing the difference between someone who is truly just narcissistic versus a Nephilim host. You would feel that darkness, when you're in their presence. And this is where discernment comes in, right? Like Dr. Monzo, when you were talking about your encounter with that Nephilim, like you had a check in your spirit. And I've not been in the presence of a Nephilim, but people that have told me like it's bone chilling. You feel that. And so similarly with Nephilim hosts, there would be that dark presence connected to their personality and what they do.
Yeah, I'm assuming you would see more of that. Was it 13 through 19 or 16 through 19?
That 13 was through 19. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kind of while we're on this subject, we did have a question come in. This is from Return to Torah. And the question is, didn't a lot, and I think this is really directed to Dr. Sanger, but didn't a lot of women who birthed the Nephilim offspring die from having giant babies?
No. So I can't speak to antiquity, but I can speak to the development of Nephilim that are alive today. So the gestation period is 4 months, from what I'm told. And, they're not born as giants, but they rapidly grow. Now, I should say this, it just gets, sometimes it's really hard to wrap your mind around this. And this is where, just leaning into the Holy Spirit and saying, Lord, what of this is true? What of this is deception? But I trust my friend Elle and her report, in addition to other overcomers, because these women that are coming from this conception ritual, that were birthed as a result of this, they don't necessarily interact with each other. They're in different parts of the world, but they have very similar stories. So it's kind of like people that are abducted, have very similar stories. And you start to say, okay, there's got to be truth in here because their stories are just lining up. Well, so the Nephilim that appear on Earth, like Dr. Monzo encountered, what I'm told is very similar to what he experienced. Is most of them are male, although not all of them, but most of them are men, and they are incredibly gorgeous. They're not necessarily giants, but they are incredibly strong, very intelligent. And so those are the ones that will blend in and appear on Earth. But then those that are underground, for example, Elle has experienced many Nephilim underground. In fact, she had a Nephilim as her handler at one point in her life. And it's very difficult for her to even describe what they would look like. She essentially says, imagine the worst monster you could see and then multiply that by 10 or 100. So they're more in their true form underground, and they're very tall as well. So it's interesting because they're shapeshifters. They can blend in when they need to blend in, but then their true nature is what she has encountered, underground in the tunnels and whatnot.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Dr. Monzo, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this part of the discussion before we kind of move on to our next topic of mind control?
Yes. I was just going to say it's very interesting because the phraseology I use on a weaponized nanotech pathogen, or what some people are calling gang of function now, has almost identical traits. Like you would almost call these things chimeras on a microscopic level, because they're no longer just one type of pathogen. Like they have literally mixed and mingled the seeds, and they put in genetic stuff, and they have the nanotech in there. And it's weird because they're very intelligent, but because they have that satanic information technology running them, and they can connect to AI systems and Wi-Fi, but they shapeshift and they change and they do all these things to evade the immune system. And they do a lot with turning off different genes in our bodies so they can hide. We actually have something called light control genes in our body. These genes are supposed to be on, and that's how the immune system really works, is through the process of using light to find things. And basically what they're doing is very similar to DARPA's stealth jet technology, where they turn these genes off so your body can't bend and unbend light, and they make themselves invisible in your body. But looking through this, I got to watch some of Dr. Sanger's videos, and I was kind of got like an epiphany, and I was thinking about, maybe they're not just turning on genes, but turning genes off, but turning genes on. And what happens if a lot of the Nephilim type genes have been passed on to more people than we think, and based on lifestyle and how our parents lived, these different expressions are being turned on. And maybe that's more of what they're doing, is trying to find a way to turn more of the Nephilim genes on and less human genes off. It's a really interesting concept. I mean, I can't prove that yet. It's just a theory, but I know pretty well now how weaponized nanotech works and how to get it out of the body. And it's so advanced. Without using light, sound, magnetism, and prayer, these things just evade your normal supplements because they're so highly, high tech. But I just find it interesting. I would almost rename them Nephilim bugs.
Wow.
Because they sound a lot like it. So that's my 2 cents. But yeah, this next topic is going to be really interesting because yeah, they're doing so much already, and they've been doing it for a very, very long time. And I guess there was 2 other things I was going to mention. One, this is another reason why I think it's important for people to understand this agenda, because even in the holistic health field that I'm in, when I start talking about this technology, people think you're crazy. And then when you mention that it's demonic and it comes from Satan, there's a lot of practitioners like, oh, I don't use that name. It's like, okay, well, if you don't want to hear the truth, I don't know how we can help you. But yeah, he's alive, he's real, and he does have technology out there. And these scientists don't know what they're doing. And if we don't understand that, you can't understand nanotech, because people go back and say, well, how can it be this advanced? And I'm like, because man didn't invent it. This is very ancient technology that has been brought back. It's way more advanced than what we are or how we think. And it's so evil, most people have a hard time thinking that something this bad could be out there. Like, well, who would make this stuff? Well, Satan.
Right.
It's not just like some bad guy in some room who came up with these ideas. This is him putting out his technology through people who are willing to listen and move forward with these programs. But I would say 99% of the people in this field have no clue what the technology is they're messing with. And the other part on this is people have this misunderstanding on things happening intentionally. And I think maybe before 2020, people thought I was crazy. But after that, I think now people realize, no, there absolutely is an agenda here. And they absolutely are creating these issues. So you look at it and go, why would they be spraying and contaminating everything in the environment? Wouldn't these bad guys be poisoning themselves? I think people need to understand that's why the agenda of the Nephilim is so important, because guess what? They already have mixed and mingled seed. They're trying to corrupt the real seed, which is us. It's just like you look out in the field and what do you see? You see these genetically modified organisms. They have built-in technology to be resistant to all the pesticides.
Wow.
So they can spray pesticides and kill the real food, but it doesn't touch the GMO food. Well, they're the same thing. They don't mind spraying themselves because they're already altered. They just want to alter everyone else. So when you start seeing this picture, you start getting a better understanding of why would these people be doing something so crazy? And aren't they affecting themselves? They don't care. They're already changed. They just want to change us. So I think that's a big piece for people to understand.
That's a huge piece for us to understand. I hadn't considered it in that light. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Dr. Sanger, did you want to speak to that also?
Well, I'm having epiphanies as he's speaking, just thinking about, I talk about parasites as well. The Lord kind of led me down that trail about 6 months ago. And, these parasites really have these mind control properties to them. And just like you were saying earlier, you would rename some of these pathogens Nephilim bugs. Well, very much I'm in agreement with that as well, because we can see how, this Nephilim agenda is just, the technology is so far advanced. And, I think that's where that people have a lot of cognitive dissonance, is like, well, how can this stuff exist? Just like you were saying, Dr. Monzo. But we have to realize that what they're showing the public is 50 to 60 years behind what the technology they're actually using. And so once we can grasp that concept and to understand the depth of the evil, I mean, they know no limits, right? As far as defiling humanity. And so I think we have to understand, okay, this is busy happening. But, one of the things that I hope we have time for at the end is I always want to leave people with hope, because, as we're about to dive into some of this mind control technology and uncover some things, it can get pretty dark. And I don't want people leaving like, just overwhelmed. I always like to bring that hope, because Jesus is our living hope. We are never without hope. So I want to put a plug in, Chelle, that you just make sure we have enough time that I can give some, like, how do we break free from mind control?
Absolutely. In fact, why don't you go ahead and lead us in that direction? And just so everybody realizes, Dr. Sanger has another appointment that she has to meet. And so she's only going to be with us for about less than the next 40 minutes. So, but hopefully, Dr. Monzo, you can hang back a little bit because I do have some more questions. So if your schedule's open, we would love that. But Dr. Sanger, go ahead and lead us in that direction of mind control and your thoughts there.
Okay, well, so there's so many ways, that they're using mind control technology, but what I want to highlight is optogenetics. And so what optogenetics is it's this neurobiological technique that combines the usage of light, like what Dr. Monzo was just speaking about, with genetic engineering to control genetically modified neurons. Now, neurons, as we know, those are the cells within our brain and our nervous system. And we can think of, neurons as these living storage containers that have these doorways called ion channels. And so when a neuron receives a strong enough signal, it will open up and allow that electric charge to come through it, and then it will spread to neighboring neurons. Well, this is how information gets passed across the brain. And with optogenetics, it actually hijacks this process. So optogenetics is essentially a form of gene therapy, and I want to describe it a little bit in more depth. So what scientists do is they will redesign a neuron to be sensitive to light by changing the information in the genetic code of, whatever lab animal they're working with. And so essentially scientists will add genetic code to the specific neurons that they want to control. And this new code then creates a special protein called an opsin. And opsins are sensitive to light. They generate this light sensitivity. So then what scientists do is they bombard the neurons with light, and that allows them to selectively activate and deactivate certain neurons. So that's kind of an overall view of optogenetics, but I want to dive a little bit deeper now. So just so folks know, this was first discovered, this type of science was in the 1970s. But the seminal breakthroughs really came in the early 2000s. And right now, optogenetics is the fastest growing field within applied research. So it is just expanding leaps and bounds. Now, one of the seminal breakthroughs came when scientists discovered that the opsin produced by green algae is actually activated by blue light. So the ion channel within green algae is called channel rhodopsin 2, or CHR2, and it's responsible for algae growing towards the light. Well, so what scientists thought is if they can mimic this process by getting neurons to express light-sensitive ion channels, kind of like CHR2, then they could potentially control the activation of neurons using bursts of light. So what scientists began to do is genetically modify these lab animals by placing the genes which encode for the CHR2 virus, or CHR2, into a virus. And then they infect this specific neurons within animals with this virus. Then once the CHR2 gene enters the neurons become activated by light. And so scientists then, they implant this fiber optic in the brains of the animals, and that allows them to control the neurons through pulses of LED blue light. So essentially what happens is with optogenetics, these scientists can track brain activity because the genetically modified neurons will light up when they're activated. Now I want to share a couple of studies. One is from 2014, and this was published in Nature. And it really gives us an indication of how optogenetics can be used. Now, interestingly, when I read this study, I noticed that most of the researchers are from my alma mater, UC San Diego. And when I was an undergraduate, I've been doing research since like 1989. My first research job was at the VA Medical Center in La Jolla, California. But prior to that, as a student at UC San Diego, I did research in a pigeon lab. And so I used operant conditioning to shape the behavior of pigeons. Well, interestingly, this research that I'm referring to in 2014, those researchers also used operant conditioning, but they used it and with some slight twists. So initially, what they did is they wanted to activate and deactivate a conditioned fear response within a rat. And so what they did is they paired an audible tone with an electric shock to condition the rat to associate the tone with the electric shock. So essentially, you know, the rat formed this associated memory of a feared response to the tone even before the shock was delivered. Well, that's classic behavioral modification. Now, the twist in this research study is that they injected a virus containing the CHR2 gene into the amygdala of the rats, because the amygdala is where fear originates from. And instead of pairing the shock with the auditory tone, they paired it with the light instead. And they got a feared response just like they did with the auditory tone. Now, what they discovered is they could actually deactivate that feared response when they changed the pattern of the pulsating light. And then likewise, they discovered that they could reactivate that feared response when they stimulate the amygdala with light. So in taking a step back, the big picture, essentially, they were able to manipulate memory. So what optogenetics does is it steps us into this era of memory engineering. Now, another research study that came out about the same time, this was in Science magazine, and this was the report is entitled "Creating a False Memory in the Hippocampus." And what this outlines is how MIT scientists can create false memories in genetically modified mice. So what scientists did is they injected the mice with the CHR2 gene to shape the memory. And the neurons that activated in the process of memory formation light up as a result of the CHR2. And that shows the scientists exactly which neurons to manipulate. So they were able to successfully make mice recall something that didn't actually happen. So let me describe how this works. What they did is they took mice and they put them in arena A, and it's like a maze, you know, and they allowed the mice to explore freely. No shock was delivered in arena A, but because of the CHR2 gene and the use of optogenetics, these scientists could track the neurons that were activated in memory formation for arena A. So as the mice were learning about arena A and which direction to go and all of that, the scientists knew which neurons were being activated. So then they took the mice from arena A and they put them in arena B. And they triggered those neurons that formed the memory of arena A. When they triggered those neurons, they then paired it with an electric shock. Then they took the mice and they put them back in arena A. Remember, arena A never had electric shock. But when they put the mice back in there, they had a strong feared response. Now, to prove that this was because of the false memory they had just generated in these mice, they took the same mice and put them in arena C, which was a novel arena, never had been in there before. And the mice had no feared response. And so from this study, what it shows is that the scientists were able to successfully create this false memory of the mice being shocked in arena A when they never received shock in arena A. It was because the scientists manipulated their memory while in arena B and drew up that memory of arena A and paired it with a shock. Now, in order to share some of the more recent research, I have to use a little code language because I know, Chelle, you post on, I think it's Facebook and YouTube.
Yes.
So I'll do my best to use some code language. So that virus, you know, that spread and caused lockdowns, I'll refer to that as the bioengineered V. Okay. Yeah. So that's what I'm discussing. Now, keep that in mind because I want to describe a research study both in 2017 and 2020. So the one in 2017 came out of Caltech. And what it showed is that researchers were able to develop 2 new virus vectors that can efficiently carry genetic cargo past the blood-brain barrier. And so these vectors, these virus vectors, actually helped researchers be able to study specific types of neurons and be able to modulate those neurons with light. Now, what is the implication of this? So last week, I had my good friend Mitchell Flourn. He is a biopharmaceutical microbiologist, also whistleblower on Big Pharma. If you've heard me talk about him before, he is probably the most brilliant person I've ever encountered. He's like a walking research library, no joke. I absolutely am so grateful for Mitchell. He has this photographic memory and it's just insane. Like I'll be wanting to research something and I'll send him an email. Mitchell, what do you have on this? And I get like 10 or 20 research studies sent to me. Well, anyways, he called me last week because with all the research that he's been reading, he's putting together, he's connecting the dots in ways that he really wanted me to understand so that I could alert people and make people aware. So one of the things that he was pointing out is that, researchers have found that with this bioengineered V, what happens is it actually replicates in the retina. And it can cause photoreceptor cells to express opsin proteins. Now, the implications of this are huge because remember, these opsins act as a gateway to optogenetics, which again is the science of using light to control the behavior of cells, i.e. mind control. So people infected with this bioengineered V will have opsins with heightened sensitivity to light. And this is what the Caltech article was alluding to, is that these viral vectors have become effective vehicles for delivering genes into the cells. So now this 2020 research study builds on this, and it's entitled Deep Brain Optogenetic Control Without Implants. And in this, it says scientists have created a light responsive opsin so sensitive that even when engineered into cells deep within tissue, it can respond to external light stimulus. Okay, so now let's back up and look at the big picture. Let's take in consideration the fact that there's been this push to get rid of incandescent lights and to promote these LED lights. Well, researchers have found that bioengineered opsins are not triggered by ambient light, but are triggered by a strong or bright source of light. And LEDs are bright light sources. And I noticed Dr. Monzo put on his blue light glasses, which is perfect because that's what we really need to do. Because as I mentioned, these opsins traditionally are triggered by blue light, by blue LED lights. Unfortunately, though, researchers are tweaking opsins even more and making them sensitive to more wavelengths of light. So now red light, green light, and yellow lights, in addition to blue lights, can also trigger these opsins. And so essentially what Mitchell is trying to help me understand so I can help others understand is that this bioengineered V activates opsins, which are then used with optogenetics for mind control. And so that's why it's really important that I wanted to save time so that I could talk about how do we break free from mind control. But I want to pause there in case you all have questions or something to add.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure that Dr. Monzo has some things to add. So I'm gonna hand it over to Dr. Monzo, and we'll just keep in mind that then we're going to hand it back to you, Dr. Sanger, as quickly as possible so that you can share with us what's on your heart about breaking free from mind control before you have to leave us for your next appointment. Dr. Monzo, let me hand it on over.
Well, I don't want to say too much because she's going to need more time, but I could go on forever on this.
And keep in mind too that after Dr. Sanger leaves us, if you can stay and share with us, we would just be thrilled.
I was just looking at there's a definite correlation between what they're doing again and copper. and the lies about copper since the 1940s. And I was wondering, okay, so how does this affect the locus coeruleus, which is, a lot of people don't know what that is. Locus coeruleus is a blue dot in your brainstem. It's Latin, it means the blue dot because it's copper. Copper is usually blue. Although copper can actually, I'm just now finding out, copper can take on all the colors of the rainbow, depending on what it's binding to. And so sometimes copper looks like blue or green because it's reflecting that wavelength of light and absorbing red. Other times it can take on a reddish color because it's reflecting that and absorbing the blue-green. So I just looked it up, and of course, the locus coeruleus and optogenetic modulation. And it's talking about how they are affecting that part of the brain, which is really interesting because that's the part of the brain that delivers copper throughout the rest of the brain. And that is directly related to the areas of the brain that we have to do with fear and anxiety. In fact, one of the root words in the word copper in the Hebrew is fear and anxiety, because copper is directly related to the part of the brain that has to do with all those type of responses, post-traumatic stress and fight and flight, and a lot of the limbic system. So all of that is definitely related. So it'd be really interesting to know whether or not the scientists realize they're doing that or someone else is directing them to do that. But I have a feeling there's a huge correlation here with how they're manipulating copper. And of course, they do it all the time with nanotech. And of course, they've absolutely depleted copper out of our soil since the 1940s. So I just thought that was interesting. The only thing I'll add to that is, the nanotech is so advanced. I think it's Dr. Charles Morgan, I think. There was another guy, Dr. James something, started with a G. They both gave these presentations to, it was the military. Probably some top level military, maybe. I mean, it could have been like the Navy SEALs or maybe even the Marines, but I don't know if it actually said who it was. But you can find these videos online. And the one, I think it was Dr. Charles Morgan. It was like back in like maybe 2018. He was talking about how they were already working on technology of a headset. So imagine this. There's like person A and person B. And both of them put on a headset, and then you have person C. So the illustration he gives is person C is in war and he gets hurt very badly and he needs emergency surgery. Person B is the other soldier with him. No experience, but he puts the headset on. Back in the States, person A is a medical doctor, puts on the headset and takes over muscular control, complete control over person B, and through him performs the surgery on person C. And then he says, we've already done it. The next application is to make this nano-sized so we can get it into the person and the soldiers without having to wear a headset. Now that's 2018. So were they able to accomplish that before the jab?
Wow. Yeah.
I could talk all day on this. So I'll let Dr. Sanger keep going so we can get to the what we can do about this technology and what we can do about all these things, because there absolutely are answers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Monzo. And Dr. Sanger, we'll turn it back over to you.
Well, I think I want to start just by encouraging people that there's always a way out of the dark caverns of mind control, because our creator, he designed our brains with a capacity of neuroplasticity. And I think it's one of the most amazing features of our brain. It means that our brains are malleable and adaptable. And we read about this in Romans 12:2, which says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Well, one of the things that I love to do is dig into the etymology of words. I did that in my book. And, I wanted to understand, okay, Lord, what does it mean literally to renew our mind? And so I just began digging into the Greek word for renew, and it's anakinosis. And not only does it mean renewal, but it means renovation, a complete change for the better. So that means our brains, our minds have the opportunity to completely change for the better. And it comes, that word anakinosis comes from a Greek root word, anakino, which means to cause to grow up, to make new, to be changed into a new kind of life as opposed to the former corrupt state. And I love that. To me, that just speaks so much hope. So we can ask the Lord to renew our mind day by day. And one of the things that I do just daily is I pray and I put on my spiritual armor. And I've had like my youngest son, he's like, why do you do it every day? Do you take it off? And I thought that was a great question. And I do it just as a reminder that each day I know I am entering into a spiritual battle and I want to be fully equipped and armored up. So I just pray through that. And the other thing that I do is I bind my mind to the mind of Christ, because I want my thoughts to align with his thoughts. And in 1 Corinthians 2:11, it says, "For who knows a person's thoughts except their own spirit within them? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God." Well, because we have the Spirit of God in us, if we've asked Jesus into our lives, we then have the mind of Christ. And for me, that truth is so important to me. I cling to that because, it's an anchor of hope for me, especially as, I research such dark and disturbing material, is recognizing that I have the mind of Christ, and Jesus is, like I mentioned before, our living hope. So we are never without hope. Now, one of the things that I mentioned before is at the core of this Nephilim agenda is the goal to strip us of our humanity. So what Nephilim hosts are trying to do is they're trying to hijack our bodies and turn us into hybrids. But in order to do that, they first have to hijack our minds. Well, the good news is they cannot hijack the mind of Christ. And that is precisely why it's so important to take every thought captive and make sure that it's aligning with Jesus. Now, one of the things I think, Dr. Monzo, you touched on this a little bit, and I want to build on it, is the fact that fear is one of the most powerful drivers of mind control. And of course, the Nephilim hosts, they understand this, and that's why they had to create fear and panic in the masses so that they could roll out their surveillance system. Under normal circumstances, there is no way Americans would agree to be surveilled. But unfortunately, in 2020, we came under the spell of these globalist or Nephilim host mind control tactics. And, it's really psychological warfare of the highest order. We have been lured into this war of frequencies, and it's a form of unconventional warfare. But if we recognize it, then we can rise above it. So I want to explain a little bit about what I mean by this war of frequencies. So thanks to, all the advances in quantum physics, we understand that all matter has a frequency. Well, not only does all matter have frequency, emotions carry a frequency. So for example, fear is one of the lower frequency emotions, whereas love is one of the higher frequency emotions. And, since the outbreak of the virus, so many people have come under the spell of these mind control tactics because they gave into fear. And instilling fear in the hearts of the masses is a hallmark trait of the Nephilim and their giant offspring. You think about Goliath, for example. He used fear and intimidation to paralyze the armies of Israel. Well, I think, one of the greatest tragedies of the past several years is that people have literally become incapacitated by fear. And then, of course, you have the propaganda machine of mainstream media, and they understand that a constant flow of fear-based stories will keep the masses stuck in their primitive brain where they can't access rational thought. And as we talked about earlier, fear originates in the amygdala, and it's that part of the brain that's known as the primitive brain, the hindbrain, the reptilian brain. Well, when we are fearful, our ability to process nuanced information is impaired, and we're more likely just to blindly follow others rather than use critical thinking skills. And so once we understand, that this is a battle of frequencies, like I said, we can resist living in fear. With prolonged fear, it not only weakens our immune system, it pulls us down to that lower emotional frequency range where the battle is raging. And I love the fact that, our Father, he knows this about us. And that's why he warned us in the Old Testament alone 52 different times to fear not, right? And, I think about 2 Timothy 1:7, it says, "For God has not given us a spirit of of fear, but a spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. Well, we cannot have a sound mind if we're living in fear. And so we have to rise above that emotional frequency of fear, because we don't want to be deceived by all the lies that swirl down in that lower emotional frequency range. And, certainly remembering that the Nephilim, their language is deception, because they're the seed of Satan. Satan is the father of lies. And these Nephilim hosts, what they've been doing is they've been attacking humanity at these lower emotional frequency ranges to divide us. But again, now that we understand that, we can rise above it and, understand that love is one of those higher frequency emotions. And it really helps me understand in greater depth the passage in 1 John 4:18, which says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear." And so we know that we can draw close to the one who has perfect love, and that's Jesus. And because of that, we don't have to walk in fear. The only fear we want to walk in is fear of the Lord, right? And so just understanding that love overcomes fear is empowering for us. And, those are ways that we can battle mind control on our soul and our spirit level, but we're also triune beings. And so we have to come at it from the level of our body as well. And I'll defer to Dr. Monzo on this, but just make one final comment with, for those of us, I haven't been infected with the bioengineered V, but I know lots of people that have. If you've been infected with that V, or you've taken that thing in your arm that causes harm, or you've been around others that have, you could have spike proteins in your body. And we want to be able to find ways to eliminate the spike proteins from our bodies so that they're not able to, generate those opsins that then can lead to that mind control. And, FLCCC has protocols that allow you to eliminate those spike proteins. But I just want to defer to Dr. Monzo, because this certainly is his area of expertise rather than mine.
Yes, it is. Let me go ahead and let you answer that, Dr. Monzo, before Dr. Sanger has to leave us.
Yes, sure. Well, there's a lot of things we can do. The number one thing we're doing right now is, I had a little cough there. It's called the Alphonso Body Coherent Restore. And I developed that originally to knock out nanotechnology and weaponized pathogens in the body. So, and then after getting a lot of samples of the jab, I started designing a more advanced version for getting that stuff out of the body. So what we do is we use light therapy with frequency. So there's different frequency vials that we program with the inverted frequency of the materials. And we put it in a laser, in front of a laser, and the laser goes through the vial and picks up those frequencies and carries them in the body. And we call that destructive interference. It's the same thing as noise cancellation. So anything in the body that has that inverted frequency basically disintegrates. And then we're also using the original sounds through usually tuning forks. Sometimes we can do other things, but it's the original notes on how music used to be programmed. And there's laying on of hands with prayer throughout the whole process. And then we also have a magnetic device that we use, and we have 3 versions right now. But it basically puts out a huge magnetic field that either destroys nanotech or erases its software. And so that's what we're doing now. It's really a form of laying on of hands prayer along with technology to get that stuff out of the body. And then there's other things you can take. Fulvic minerals. We produce one that's really good. That's really great for getting the graphene oxide out of the body. There's other supplements we can do for that kind of stuff too that helps. And then there's some more laying on of hands for people that got the jab, because we have to do a little bit more work on getting some genes turned back on that they're turning off. And what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, just getting into understanding copper and how important copper is. There's a specific way you need to take copper. I don't think we have time to discuss all of that, but the Recuperate by FIQ is a really good source because it's whole food and you have a lot of the other things you need in it. But there's definitely a good way to get copper into the body more, because when you get depleted in copper, you're going to have more fear and anxiety. If you have a lot of fear and anxiety, it depletes your copper. So they know what they're doing, and they're doing it on purpose. But there's a lot of things we can do, both with supplements, with laying on hands, with prayer, with more modern technology we're working on to get this stuff out of the body. So that's what we're trying to let people know is we're having very high success. And, you know, I do a lot with epigenetics. So Chelle knows that we've been doing a lot with getting her methylation genes turned back on so she can detox correctly. And I don't think people understand how much the methylation affects health. And I mean, it covers so many areas: cardiovascular, neurological, everything from anxiety all the way to autism can be related to methylation. If these genes are turned off, you can't make the enzymes to process your amino acids to make the proper neurotransmitters. So cardiovascular is big for epigenetics. Neurological is big. Endocrine and hormones is really big. Fertility, digestion, elimination. So you're seeing a lot more people have problems with methylation genes because they're getting really good at turning those things off with the environment, so your body isn't able to process these things right in your body, and so your body can't detox. So there's an agenda they're doing there to try to keep this stuff in us and not allow the body to get it out. But the great thing with epigenetic genes is we can turn them right back on, just using frequency and the right supplements.
You know, it's my journey's been really amazing. I had been, you know, really very ill with getting nowhere and getting it solved. No matter how much money I did, no matter how many spent, no matter how many detoxes I went through, no matter how many doctors I consulted with, and that be it integrative functional medicine, you know, all range that I tried. And then last November, I started working with Dr. Monzo, and then I had really been very, very ill. And I guess it was about 34 genes or something that were turned off in my body. And we've the last scan that he did, we've got it down to 7. And I tell you what, I am a living testament because I feel better than I have. I felt like my life had just been, you know, snatched away, my life force. And I feel stronger and better and, you know, able to think more clear. Is spiritual life improve? I mean, all the way around, relationship improvements. It's amazing to me how many areas this affects. And then working with people on Dr. Monzo's staff, working through some of these genetic things that, I mean, there's no way I could know what to do, how to pray, what was there. And it's been an amazing journey for me. I'm so, so grateful for the work that you and all of your staff are doing at Wellbeing by Design. And just so everybody knows, I have links in this description for Dr. Sanger's website and for her YouTube channel and Rumble, and also for Dr. Monzo and his clinic and the great work going on there. So, you know, please look in that description box to find those. And so I know that your time is getting short, Dr. Sanger. So I want to turn it back over to you for any last thoughts that you want to share with us.
Well, I actually have a question.
Okay.
So, Dr. Monzo, what you are doing sounds incredible. My question is, like, do you work with people remotely, or do they have to be in your location to work with you?
Nope, they don't have to be in my location.
That's what's so amazing. Yeah. I was just going to say, I've never gotten to meet Dr. Monzo in person. Everything that we are doing is remote. I haven't had to go take one blood test, any of this. This is amazing.
And guess what? We don't sell your DNA. we actually destroy it. And we destroyed the quantum entanglement with it. Because see, your DNA has a quantum entanglement. So what happens is when people send in their DNA to us, when we're testing them with our advanced technology through frequency, it's literally connecting directly to the person. And it's like them being tested in real time. And the military is, well, I don't know if the military is the first to technically figure this out, but I'm sure they were told by someone else. And they did these experiments with testing soldiers and seeing how far away they could get their DNA sample and still have a reaction with the DNA and the person at the exact same time. And they found it was instantaneous. So when we talk about soul ties and things like that, it's because there is a quantum entanglement, there is a salt connection to the DNA that never goes away. And we had an interesting one not long ago because one of our devices puts out this, I'm not allowed to say what it is, let's say a strong magnetic field. And we were doing it with their DNA using someone as a surrogate. So they were holding the DNA and they were sitting in for the person. So all the frequencies are getting sent to the person at a distance. And we did the, it's called TechX. We did the TechX on it. And it was like 20 minutes in. I didn't think anything of it. Well, later that day, we got a call from this person and we found out that they had a blood glucose monitor on. And 20 minutes into the therapy, the blood glucose monitor died. And that's because this magnetic device is supposed to destroy electrical devices. So even at a distance, working on her DNA, that happened to something in her body. And
Wow.
If we would have knew she would have had one, we would have told her, you know, we can't do this with that on. But because we usually in person, we tell people all electrical devices have to come off if you don't want them to be killed. And that's the purpose of the device, because these nanobots are machine and we want to knock them out. So it's very powerful. So yeah, we deal with people all over the world. And we also deal a lot with the SRA. We do a lot here with satanic ritual abuse all over the world. So we have a lot of the same experiences that you're talking about with people being grown in test tubes and labs, and they have recognition of it, and it's some crazy stuff. Wow.
Well, I'm going to be referring a bunch of people to you. I hope that's okay.
Thank you. Oh, no problem. I'll try to keep up.
This has just been such a pleasure to have both of you on together. You know, I certainly will be sending you both an email. Hopefully we can even do a follow-up show at some point if it works out for both of your schedules. It's been my joy and delight to have you both on today.
Well, thank you. And it was wonderful to meet you both. I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Absolutely. Same.
Very good. Well, thank you, Dr. Sanger. I know you have another appointment you have to get to, so we'll go ahead and say goodbye to you and look forward to speaking with you again sometime. And Dr. Monzo, if you'll stick around, we've got some great questions maybe we can go over for our audience and stuff. All righty. Okay. All right. Well, gosh, what a treat that was.
Yeah, we're learning all kinds of new things.
We really are. I'm
looking at this stuff going, oh man. Now I'm really wondering what the connection between white light activation is and copper. Because we know a number of other things like your vitamin D, which is actually a steroid hormone, as you know now. But your retinol has to be activated by D or by sunlight. Your D is made by sunlight. And looking at the locus coeruleus, man, I'm tongue-tied today. The locus coeruleus and how this is related to those optogenetics. I'm really wondering if copper is also not activated by light in the body to do different things.
Interesting. When I've looked at your red pill, blue pill, as soon as we started discussing this, I was thinking about the PowerPoint where you were explaining that. I think that was at Take on the World with the red pill, blue pill, and and making the purple. And I was like, it's something I could see the wheels turning.
Yeah, and now, like I said, I was doing more research because something came to light, and even last night I was reading up on things, and I found out that in that PowerPoint, if we need to, I can bring it up. I had the pictures of the ceruloplasmin.
Oh,
well, that's the most powerful antioxidant probably in the body. It's a protein enzyme. It's what combines copper and iron.
Right.
And it's the main carrier of copper in the body. Now, there's many other carriers of copper, but that tends to be the number one. And if you look at the picture I have of that in the book, I had it was a colored picture of the ceruloplasmin. And it basically had all 6 colors of the rainbow. It didn't have white. That would be the 7th color of the rainbow.
Right.
But it has all 6 other colors. And now doing more research, I'm finding that copper is interesting, and it's one of the only metals that takes on color. But it can actually take on all 6 colors of the rainbow.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
It
And
really
I also
is.
found that, once again, I've been thinking this for a long time, that ancient Israel was probably using copper to dye the tzitzits.
Yeah.
That even that word azure for azure blue can come from something that comes from copper.
Wow.
And I found that the ancient Egyptians was using copper as a blue pigment to dye things. And I'm like, oh, the Egyptians, I wonder where they learned that from.
Right. Right.
It's like, do we really think
so
the
it wasn't
ancient,
necessarily a snail, right?
right, do we really think ancient Israel was using a snail,
An unclean animal.
an unclean animal to dye their tzitzits? I bet it was copper. Think of
I
us
know.
as a temple, and there's
Right.
a lot of copper in the temple. So if people don't know it, the Hebrew word there is the same word that's often translated as bronze
Right.
and brass. And that's because bronze and brass are alloys mixed to copper. But the only pure metal out of the three is copper. But that Hebrew word is used for all three words. So we have a big problem in the Bible, because a lot of times when it's saying brass and brass and bronze, it's actually speaking of copper, because it's the only pure metal.
I was looking at this. I was doing a study on the two pillars of Solomon's porch, and how one faced the north direction and one the south. And so immediately, with my study on the tribes, I'm going, okay, Northern Kingdom, Southern Kingdom, and how each was covered with what it was described as a copper net. And I thought, that's fascinating. That's just fascinating. And, I don't know all the implications for that, but when I'm looking at that as the two houses and the, and the copper net covering, and the net and the relation to the kingdom, as being like a net, thrown out into the sea, I was like, wow, there's something more there. Definitely.
Absolutely. Yep. So for people who don't know, they can go to, I think it's on Rumble, and I think it's also on Brighteon. Just, do a search, Dr. Monzo, What is the Matrix? And that will be the Take on the World 2022. Go through that presentation, and you're going to learn a whole lot about iron and copper, and why we all have too much iron, and why we do not have enough copper, and why they're lying to us about copper being toxic, and why they're taking it out of the food.
Yeah. After this broadcast, I will go back and I will edit the description and make sure that I have a link to that presentation in there for everybody, to make it easy on everybody so they can find it. So we had some good questions that I just kind of wanted to get some thoughts on. And one that I really had for you, Dr. Monzo, that's been on my brain was, what are your thoughts on this smart meter technology, the effects on the recipients of organ replacement, blood transfusion, and the possible soul ties that result from the energetic fingerprint of organ resonance? I know that's a loaded question, but
that's three questions, I think.
Okay. Well, I packed it in there.
The first one, smart meters are not so smart. And if you want to become dumber, use a smart meter.
Right.
Smart meters are awful. Now, we are working on things. Oh, should I do this? I'm going to get bombarded. We have someone here working with us now, and we are working on some copper technology. And we're working on something called a temple shield. And we're working on some stuff that you can put over your smart meter that will harmonize. And the temple shield is going to be for EMFs and 5G and all kinds of stuff. Basically, protect the temple and keep everything out as best as we can. And it's working pretty good. I have to still do some experiments. So it's probably going to be a month before we really start selling these things. But I want to do some dry blood tests and some testing before and after tests and stuff. But we were working on things that we'll be able to put on even on smart meters and change it so it's not affecting you. And not only that, but maybe restore the sky. Let's just leave it at that, if you know what I mean.
Wow. Yeah.
If you're looking up and you're seeing things that don't belong there, let's get rid of that.
Absolutely. Very, very interesting.
I'm absolutely not in favor of organ transplants unless it's your last option and you're dying.
And explain to us, explain to us why, because I find this part just fascinating, you know, and I never would have understood even a little bit of it without, you know, having you as my doctor.
Yeah, and I have a, I don't know where on my website, but somewhere on the website, we're trying to work on that. And we just still don't have the Dr. Monzo website. If people don't know, there's a Dr. Monzo website in my book that no one can get to because it's not there anymore. And the reason why that's not there was because the medical board did not like me calling myself Dr. Monzo without putting like ND after my name or something, because, you know, they don't like that in Ohio. So that website came down and we never got it back up, and there's all kinds of work that needs to be done on it. So that is going to be coming back soon, and we're working on making our website more user-friendly. But somewhere there is a link to my All Top Body radio shows I did way back like in 2014, and I have a whole show on this. But basically, in layman's terms, there's a couple of things. One, the life is in the blood, and that word is the Hebrew word for the soul. Soul is in the blood. And that's why we have these things called soul ties. And there's a number of ways to make soul ties, but a lot of them involve the combining of fluids, especially with intercourse and stuff like that, like men and women, husband and wife, create a soul tie. They become one flesh. And there's many other ways you can make soul ties that don't involve just sex and things like that, or transferring of DNA. But DNA is a big one too, because what happens is in the physics world, we have something called quantum entanglement. And basically that's a fancy word meaning that your energetic signature is found in all of your DNA. And no matter where your DNA goes, it's always directly connected to you. So that includes your organs. So if someone takes out one of your organs and puts it in another person, and that person's still alive, then there can be a quantum entanglement between the two people. And what a quantum entanglement means is when two things are quantumly entangled, whatever happens to these particles that were connected to these particles happen at the same time. So if you affect these instantly get affected no matter how far away they are in the world, just like a cell phone. I pick up a cell phone and you have a cell phone, we can communicate. So there is a direct correlation and connection between particles that are quantumly entangled, and whatever you do to one instantly happens to the other. So when we're sharing organs with another person and we create a quantum entanglement, you will have these things that occur. And this is very common in the medical field, and they know it, where someone gets an organ from someone else and they start taking on the characteristics of that person. They can start liking the same food, they can start acting like them. In fact, we've even had stories, one where it was, and this was a really interesting one that even goes beyond quantum entanglement to quantum memory, that water has memory capabilities, okay? And so an organ can get programmed with memory and hold on to it. And what happened is someone donated their heart. So they're dead now, their heart gets donated to another person. The person who received the heart ended up marrying the same person that person was married to, and then ended up killing themselves the same way the person who donated the heart killed themselves. That is quantum entanglement memory. The memories were passed on and held in that organ, and when the next person got it, they picked up all of those feelings and memories and attitudes that was passed on from that person. And the other part that is people understand is from a creation perspective. Okay, when you do an organ transplant, the number one thing they have to do is put you on drugs for the rest of your life to prevent your body from rejecting the organ, because naturally your body will always reject someone else's organs. So if we think about that, did he create us to take organs out and put them into someone else? If our body always rejects that.
And aren't those immunosuppressant drugs that they have to put you on?
So basically they're manipulating your body to get it to not do what it was designed to do, to accept an organ that it doesn't want.
Right. Amazing.
Now, some people are in a bad situation where they didn't have the knowledge required to heal themselves, and they're at the last step or last process in life, and they had to do an organ transplant to save themselves. And then there's stuff we can work on with that, especially spiritually, to try to break those soul ties, just like you would break them in spiritual warfare, praying through different things and trying to get that stuff removed and trying to undo that. That takes a lot of work, and we can do that. But typically, the problem is we have all been dumbed down on purpose, and they don't want us to know that we can regenerate and heal organs. So if you can catch the problem before you need a transplant, we can always regenerate that organ. They just don't want you knowing that. So unfortunately, not enough people were trained to know how to do that and get organs working again, so you don't need a transplant.
Wow, amazing. So there's two separate solutions there. Number one, if you're facing that, contact Dr. Monzo's office and see what you can do about regeneration instead of replacement. Number two, there's always hope in Yah's kingdom. If you've gone down that path and you're experiencing these strange things of the quantum entanglement and soul ties, contact Dr. Monzo's office, because I already know he has some trained spiritual warfare giants in his office that will help and know how to specifically, strategically know how to go in and fight a spiritual battle and get things back on the right track. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I did have a question here. This was, my friend Carrie is also a naturopathic doctor, and she's been moderating chat for us. And she had sent me a great question, and I wanted to preface it with her thoughts and then present the question. It'll be another 4-part question, but let me go ahead and preface it with what she was thinking about, and then present her question. So her thoughts were, I've been wondering if when we see people acting angry or violent in public, if these people have been targeted by intrusive thoughts and they're not able to stop themselves because they've taken the thing in the arm that causes harm. Has nanotech caused our free will to be taken from us? Is this horrible act against humanity what causes Yahusha to return due to the evil kingdom attempts to take over humanity, resulting in a bunch of brainless zombies, right? Is this why Yahusha told us that time has to be shortened or no flesh would be saved? Now, that's just kind of the comment. I'm going to let you respond to that, and then I'll give you her full question.
Oh, there's more.
There's more.
Well, the simple answer is yes, yes, yes. There's definitely things we can do, but yes, very long. This is Tesla technology. And if you didn't know, when Tesla died, a number of governments got their technology. Germany, Russia, China, and America. And have you ever heard of the HARP project? There is something called voice-to-skull communication. Now, they've dropped this for some time, but back like during Obama's era, they were really big on trying to push this even into stores, and then they dropped it because it started freaking people out. But what that is if they can get the frequency of your brain, they can tune into it like a radio and send thoughts into your mind. In fact, Jesse Ventura covered this on one of his shows, Conspiracy Theory, and he doesn't live in America anymore. And they did it to him, where literally they sent thoughts into his head, and he was like, "Oh my goodness, I'm hearing you talk in my head." They had the technology. Now, that one wasn't distance. They actually had to put something on his head to do it, but they were showing him that they could do it even at a distance if they could tune in. And what they wanted to try to push in the 2008 era was this technology, put these in stores where you would literally walk up to a product and it would send voices into your head and describe to you the product. And it freaked people out, so they dropped it. But they've had this technology for a long time. It's called voice-to-skull communication.
Wow.
So what happens is if you're a targeted individual, which basically means they got enough junk into your body through spraying an environment so that it can self-assemble and build something in you, and then you come online and they go, "Oh, look at that ping. We're able to communicate with this person." They start targeting you. And these are the people that everyone thinks crazy, because they're like, "Oh, I hear voices in my head." And so, "Oh, you're crazy. Why would they target you? You're a nobody." That's why, because you're a lab rat, right?
Wow.
And so now if you took a jab and you have this technology in your body that they can directly connect to. Absolutely. And we are finding out more and more about these synthetic peptides that happen to look just like snake venom. And that's probably what the spike protein really is. Imagine that. We're getting bit by snakes, just like in the wilderness when Moses made a copper serpent. Guess what one of the side effects of synthetic snake venom is? And almost a lot of this long haulers and a lot of the shedding, what they're shedding on us is synthetic venoms. Guess what one of the side effects of venom is? It has a name. I can't think of the name now, but it's a scientific name that means you are unable to change your mind, even given facts that you were wrong. The inability to change your mind.
Is that the cognitive dissonance?
It's like cognitive dissonance, but it's a little bit different. It's how the snake venom peptides affect the brain.
Wow.
Inability to change your mind.
Wow.
That sounds like a lot of people right now.
It's almost like, how the scriptures describe them as being stiff-necked.
Yeah. But the other answer to that question is, of course, they have this nanotech called, one of them is called legal tech. Okay. And the idea of legal tech was they're trying to sneak it into your body. And if it's in your body, it has to be activated. And they sneak little words in electronic consent forms that, no one reads because they're 1,000 pages long, that will say you're giving permission for legal tech to be installed. Well, you don't know what that means. You're like, oh, legal tech on my device. Okay, yeah, I want to be legal. What they mean is you're giving permission for legal tech to be installed in your body, and that gives them legal right to attack you. So they're trying to find ways around spiritual legality. And that's one of the purposes of the jab, is they needed legal precedents to attack you. And how they get that is by you accepting the jab. And then that's you giving them permission, basically, to say, yeah, I'm signing on the dotted line for you to do what you're going to do, because they need that legal consent.
Yeah. Gosh, that was an excellent answer. And it really kind of went to the rest of her question. So I'm going to go to another question here. So Abba's Otiot is asking, at your clinic, do you do anything on the spiritual detoxing level where the focus is on healing the inner wounded child?
Yes. We are going through Discovering Mercy's training, and everyone here is getting trained in that, and it has been revolutionary. And it's all about going back to the trauma as when we're kids, and how and now what we're really starting to see is the multiple personality disorders with SRA is not necessarily multiple persons as we maybe once thought, but more that the brain has been compartmentalized into different almost like different personalities, but it's all in one brain.
Right.
So going back to those childhood traumas and learning how to process those is taking years off of what we used to have to do.
Yeah, it's almost like everything that we had learned about what was termed multi-personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder, was almost in the realm of Christianity put as demonization. And I'm not discounting that there's not that level, of attack going on. However, when we start to look at it from the mercy perspective of surviving what was actually taking place, it puts a different perspective. It removes the shame. It, takes that aspect out of it and extends that mercy, which opens up a person's heart for healing in a whole new way.
Yeah, what we're finding is, there's this perfect balance between secular humanistic materialism and then Gnosticism. And what I'm finding is a lot of what we've been taught from the traditional church and through these programs is a lot of Gnosticism. It's overemphasizing the spiritual.
Wow.
And what we're finding is a lot of these things, we're human. There is humanity. There's no problem with humanity. We're finding a lot of these problems are on the humanity level and how they have created all these disassociations in the brain. So you have these different, what looks like different people because of how the brain has been disassociated and isn't working.
Yeah.
And when we start removing those things very easily, it's like removing the darkness from the body. And even though there is a real spiritual battle, they have no foot ground anymore because you're removing the darkness, and they just have to go.
Wow.
So we're finding out that a lot more humanity involved than what we used to think, because I think we had the tendency to over spiritualize everything. Because there obviously is a satanic spiritual effect going on with some SRA, like Dr. Sanger was talking about. But maybe that's not always the first way to attack the situation.
Right.
Maybe the first thing we do is heal the brain and the inner child and allow the brain to come back together and realize how to process these things. Because when we were little, we didn't know how to process.
Right.
So we just went into defense and we stuff the emotions and we go into protection, and now we're no longer in function. And we need to get the emotions and the function back all in balance. And when we do that, we find out maybe the spiritual battle is a lot less.
Yeah. Absolutely amazing work you're doing. I do want to just say, go to www.wellbeing, and there is a hyphen in the middle of well-being, wellbeingbydesign.com in order to visit. And that link will be in the description. Dr. Monzo, before we close out today, is there any last thoughts that you want to share with our audience?
I don't think so. I did see some of the questions coming through. And yes, obviously we deal with copper and iron. So if you need to know more on that, contact us. But you can also watch that video. I cover a lot in that. What was the matrix? What is the matrix?
What is the matrix?
And the other one, someone talked about methylene blue. I'm very hesitant to use it because it's a synthetic substance. It's actually one of the first synthetic substances they made. And I am really always hesitant to anything that man is manipulating and creating in a lab. I think the answer is, I think methylene blue does almost the exact same thing as copper. It does it faster because it's synthetic. So I think a slower and more safer way is just getting the right copper in the body, and then you don't have to worry about the methylene blue.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on. This was such a great show. I'm going to have to go back and watch slow and take notes myself, because there was so much revolutionary information shared from both you and Dr. Sanger, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you for taking your time to be with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It was a privilege, and that was great meeting her. And I have a bunch of notes myself because I have like 4 or 5 new things I want to research now.
Absolutely.
Oh, wait a minute. There's some connections here.
The wheels spinning with both of you, which I figured would happen, and I think it's a great connection. So
yes,
wonderful. All righty. Well, thank you so much. And I want to tell our audience, shalom. We pray that this has been a blessing to you, and hope to have you